I want to tell you a little bit about real estate cycles. So one of the other errors that people make is that people think that real estate just follows every other cycle, usually like a credit cycle, which goes for about 7 years. But real estate actually follows an 18-year cycle. And this is like the E equals MC squared of real estate timing. So this guy called Philip J. Anderson, I think he inherited some money. He's an Australian. And he used his time to research real estate prices in great detail. So he went to America, and he went back to 1800, where they keep good records. And from 1800 through to whenever he finished his research, he realized that real estate moved in a very reliable 18-year cycle that was interrupted only 2 times during World War I and World War II. But apart from that, very reliable. And the real estate swing is comprised of 2 upswings and 2 recessions, or two corrections. So the first upswing lasts about 6 years, 7 years, and it's followed by a mid-cycle correction that did. Then there's an explosive phase that goes for another 6 or 7 years, followed by a longer-term property market correction or a recession, and that goes for 4 years. So I presented this chart to private banks about 2 years ago, and I was telling these guys that the property market correction would be over by mid-2019, and they looked at me like I had 2 heads. But I knew this cycle. I knew that the mid-cycle correction was only going to last 2 years. And that's why I was confident that we were nearing a bottom. Now, I didn't realize it would explode the way it did after the election, but I did know that, broadly speaking, that was going to be the timing of the correction, the correction back up. So we had the 4-year period was 2008 to 2012, and now we're in a new cycle. Now, the cycle does peak in about 2026, and what we would expect to see between now and 2026 is what they call an explosive phase in real estate prices. Now, I know it's very hard to see at the moment, and it might not happen. This is just a hypothesis, but there is a lot of stimulus in the system. There is more stimulus in the system than has ever been in our history, right? You know, the US did a $2 trillion stimulus package on top of 0% interest rates. So we are going to wake up, and the lockdown's going to end, and the stimulus is going to stay in the system. And that's how I can see that, you know, we go from 2019 to 2026 with, broadly speaking, growing real estate prices. Now, the little wrinkle in this model, which makes it a little bit more interesting, is that, and it's not on this chart, but between the last 2 years of the upswing, the last 2 years, so 2024 to 2026, that's when it goes vertical. And that's what they call the winner's curse, because the people who waited for real estate prices to go up, and by the time it's 2024, they said, I just got to get in. They're the ones who get burnt, because the 2024 to 2026 is the last gasp. It's the winner's curse. It's precisely when you shouldn't be jumping in to buy real estate. But suffice to say, between now and 2024, approximately, this cycle would suggest that it's a good time to buy real estate. Now, the cycles and the history and all that stuff, you know, it could well be different this time. I mean, the recession, depression that we're about to potentially go into, it's going to be bad, right? There's no doubt about that. Some stuff's going to happen. But my guess is that if these cycles are right, there's going to be so much stimulus that when things normalize, we're going to see an explosion in real estate prices, and they can never normalize the stimulus. So that's what I think. I also think that there's going to be nothing to buy on the real estate market because there's not going to be that much desperation. But we'll see. Could be completely wrong. This is one hypothesis, but it's quite a reliable one. So there's just one other thing I wanted to say, and that's just about like real estate. Why real estate's a bit different. In times of panic, there is something else that happens in the economy, and that is that there is a flight away from paper assets or intangible assets into physical assets. And you see this across a range of asset prices, but there is often the money that comes out of the stock market doesn't go to money heaven. It goes into other assets. It goes into cash largely, but it goes into tangible assets, and tangible assets give people comfort. They're easier to value, and they have that reliability because you can see and touch it and so on. So what I would expect to see is a bit of a loss of confidence in the currency. I expect to see a flight into tangible assets. And you can have a recession or a depression and inflation at the same time. Ask anyone who lived through Weimar Germany or the 1970s and so on. It'll probably be something like that, but maybe worse.